For KASM Radio, I am Farm Director Joe Gill. We're broadcasting from Washington, D.C., relaying messages of agriculture back to central Minnesota this week. We visit with the American Feed Industry Association. Constance Cullman joining us, President and CEO. Constance, first, thanks for being here, and give us a brief background of yourself and your organization.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. My name's Constance. I am the President and CEO for the American Feed Industry Association. We're an association representing the entire feed industry and pet food industry as well. So our members include feed manufacturers, pharmaceutical, ingredient manufacturers, pet food manufacturers, even equipment manufacturers. So we've got quite a diverse membership, but they're all essential and critical to the production of safe and nutritious livestock and pet food.
We've had many outside factors affect our everyday lives. I'm sure it had an effect on you as well.
Absolutely. This has been a very tumultuous 3 years for the industry. You know, we were already seeing supply chain issues emerging before the pandemic, and of course the pandemic exacerbated those, whether it was trucking, rail, or ports. Of course, we've all heard about the port issues. And then, of course, the most recent issues with the invasion of Ukraine by Russia has certainly put the entire food system, global food system, into a tailspin.
You know, when it comes to, feed overall and regulations, since we're in D.C., we kind of have to talk about the meat of stuff, regulations and such. Are there certain things that are providing hurdles overall necessarily?
Well, absolutely. Of course, when you look at the big picture issues, the lack of investment in infrastructure has contributed to the supply chain constraints that we're having. And of course, also we were already seeing a decline in truck drivers and other critical labor, semi-skilled labor in the feed industry. And then since the pandemic, that has only gotten worse. Right now, there's about over 150 loads for every truck driver out there. So trying to find folks to be able to move product and get it to the port, where sometimes it will sit for weeks before it gets put on a ship. And then if you're lucky, you'll get that corn on a rail car maybe just a day before you need it. So it's creating a lot of stressful moments in the industry on being able to move things around, move products. So of course we've been talking to the administration, and our board of directors will be in a couple of weeks to talk directly with the administration about what they can do on some infrastructure investment and some reform on labor to be able to address some of these critical constraints. Now, that doesn't touch on those issues that are unique to the feed industry, which is a lot of times the regulatory approval at FDA, at the Center for Vet Medicine, for feed ingredients, pharmaceuticals, and feed ingredients that have unique claims that can be made about them.
I think a lot of folks out there listening, too, they wish it was more like a 50-yard dash, type process, but it's a marathon process here with, like you talked about, just logistics and infrastructure and how many loads per driver out there. We'd like to snap our fingers and say, here, we're done. It's going to be better Monday. But it's going to take longer, and that's frustrating.
It really is going to take a long time. We didn't get into this overnight, and we're certainly not going to get out of this overnight. So it is something that's we're going to have to learn to adapt, and we're going to have to learn how to address these issues in unique ways. Right now, we're looking at a lot of diversification of inputs as well as our markets, so that maybe we can leverage the eastern ports more than the western ports and start sending more product east rather than just west. We're also looking at ways that we can diversify our input suppliers. Right now, China provides 70% of our vitamins, minerals, and amino acids. That's been a real challenge, particularly when you see major cities in China and ports shutting down. But if we can diversify the inputs of that and be less reliant on one country, that can certainly help as well. So those are some of those long-term kinds of things we're thinking about. And, I always have to come back and say we were pretty good trading partners with the EU until things just started diverging and we weren't quite seeing things eye to eye. So we would like for them to say, food security might still be important, and they're being reminded of that right now. Perhaps this is an opportunity for us to revisit that trading relationship.
Finally, how do you tackle as an association the sustainability aspect that is so vastly, I guess, what would you say, almost demanded in a way by all the industries in agriculture to show how they're being sustainable? What are they doing as far as particulars and measures? How do you guys approach that?
Well, this is not a new topic to the feed industry at all, nor to the food and agricultural system here in the U.S. I would say that as a whole industry, we're probably the most sustainable industry out there. The U.S. food and ag sector is. But in the feed industry, we've been embracing co-products, and we've been upcycling co-products for decades. Almost half of the feed ingredients are actually byproducts of other industries that would otherwise go to landfills. So that's one of our unsung sustainability messages. But it doesn't matter what you've done, it's what are you looking at doing next, right? So we are doing a lot of work with our colleagues in the food system, our upstream and downstream partners, making connections there. We're developing metrics that are global based and developed on a harmonized methodology developed by the UN's Food and Ag Organization. So with our colleagues around the world in the feed industry, we've set up the Global Feed LCA Institute, which provide environmental metrics for every feed ingredient. So we'll establish that baseline. So that's pretty exciting. But I would say, first and foremost, we are reminding the federal government that we need to have a modernization of our feed ingredient approval process to be able to bring forward the many innovations that are out there by our company and members to provide solutions to some of the big challenges. We have companies, it's so exciting, we have companies that are developing feed additives that can improve the overall animal health, its welfare, the food safety, and the environmental profile. So, we got a product you can feed, it reduces enteric methane by 30 to 50%. We ought to get that in the hands of the farmer. Unfortunately, we can't. FDA doesn't have an approval process for that, and we're working hard with them to be able to get one established. So we need the government to help us get the products and the innovations we're developing into the hands of the farmer.
Some great information, great insight. Constance Cullman joining us, President and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association. Thanks for being here in D.C. and I appreciate your time, okay?
Well, thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
For KASM Radio, I am Farm Director Joe Gill.